Greetings, chess players. My name is Chris Torres, and this is Daily Chess Musings' special coverage of the 2021 FIDE World Championship Match between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi. Game 3 between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Magnus Carlsen revisits the Ruy Lopez and produced a beautiful and well-constructed dance with no missteps. Their stunningly accurate game culminated in a draw after 41 moves. So, without further ado, let's take a close look at Game 3 of the Carlsen-Nepomniachtchi match.
So the players enter Game 3 of the 2021 FIDE World Championship Match with a point apiece, and Jan Nepomniachtchi starts with 1e4. Magnus responds with e5, 2 knight f3, knight c6, 3 bishop b5. So we see the Ruy Lopez again. And again on move 3, Magnus plays a6. Jan plays 4 bishop a4. So we are still repeating what we saw in round 1. And yes, Magnus plays 4 knight f6. Jan castles on move 5, and Magnus plays 5 bishop e7. So I imparted a lot of basic information about the Ruy Lopez in the video for Game 1. So if you want to brush up on your Ruy Lopez basics, go back and view video 1 if you have not already seen it. Magnus plays 6 rook e1. Jan plays 6 b5, bishop b3. And Black's 7th move is castling. As in Game 1, Magnus Carlsen is inviting his opponent to enter into the martial attack with 7c3. 8a4. And as in Game 1, Jan Nepomniachtchi avoids the martial, but this time with a4, which is another popular anti-martial choice. Remember, in Game 1, he played 8h3, and back in 2019, he used 8d4 in his victory over Levon Aronian, and that game continued knight takes d4. Bishop takes f7 check, rook takes f7, knight takes e5, rook f8, and queen takes d4 with bishop b7. If you want to see that game in its entirety, I've included it in my notes to this lesson on dailychessmusings.com. But back to Game 3 from the 2021 FIDE World Championship Match, where Jan plays 8a4, and Black plays 8 bishop b7. Carlsen's obviously reacting to the threat of ax b5 by making it so his a8 rook is defended, so that he could play ax b5 without dropping a piece. This flexible idea completes the development of Carlsen's pieces and helps him secure his position on the queen side. Rook b8 was obviously not an option because it cedes control of the a file to white. However, 8b4 is totally playable and was seen in the Sergei Karyakin Magnus Carlsen game played at the Tata Steel tournament in Vacanzy in 2018. That game continued with 9d4, d6, dx e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, dx e5, queen e2 avoiding the trade of queens, a5, making way for a possible bishop a6, knight d2, bishop c5, knight to f3, and queen to e7. 15, bishop e3, and then there's that bishop a6 move. With his queen under attack, Karyakin played bishop takes c5, threatening Carlsen's queen, queen takes c5, and then Karyakin played queen e3, queen takes e3, and 18, rook takes e3. If you want to see the rest of that game, It is included in my notes to this lesson on dailychessmusings.com. Back to game 3, where Carlsen has just played 8 bishop b7, 9 d3. With Carlsen's bishop now on b7, Nepo restricts its range of action by playing d2 to d3. Now the complicated maneuvering can begin. Part of this maneuvering usually involves Black later transferring their bishop to c8 with a loss of tempi in order to increase its activity. Carlsen plays 9 d6, 10 knight b to d2. Jan begins his queen's knight journey along the usual Spanish route of d2 to f1 to g3. 10 rook e8, a flexible plan. Magnus abstains from defining the pawn configuration on the queen side for the time being and instead begins the thematic maneuver of rook e8 and bishop f8, which increases the overall flexibility of his position. Another possibility for Black worth considering is 10 knight to a5, threatening the Ruy Lopez bishop. The bishop backs up to a2, and then Black can immediately play c5. White continues the knight's journey. Bx a4 and knight to e3 is how the game Caruana versus Tomaszewski, played in Baku in 2014, continued. Again, I have put that game in my notes to this lesson on dailychessmusings.com. Still another interesting move 10 option for Black would be playing knight to d7, after which 11 ax b5, rook takes a8, and queen takes a8 was played in the game Niels Grandelius versus Anish Giri at the European Team Championship in Batumi in 2019. That game is also included in the notes to this lesson on dailychessmusings.com. But let's get back to Game 3 of the 2021 FIDE World Championship Match between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi, where Magnus Carlsen played the very flexible 10 rook e8. And Jan, as expected, plays 11 knight f1. Carlsen plays 11 h6, which stops White's knight from going to g5 in order to double up on Black's weak f7 pawn. 12 bishop d2. Jan prepares for lively play on the queen side while saving tempi on the knight f1 to e3 maneuver. Magnus plays 12 bishop f8, which is a nice little move that increases Black's king safety while giving the rook on e8 more scope in the e-file. 13 knight e3. From e3, Jan's knight has access to d5 or f5. 13 knight e7. And Carlsen immediately shuts down both outposts for the e3 knight. 14 c4. Nepo plays a nice pawn break, which doubles up the pressure on b5. So Magnus plays 14 bx c4, and then Jan plays 15 knight takes c4. With its earlier plans foiled, Jan's knight recaptures on c4 with dreams of jumping to a5. 15 knight c6. For the second time in this game, Carlsen uses his knight to stop Jan's plan. I really like this move by Carlsen, especially given the fact that 15 rook b8 was used in a key game by Betul Yildiz against Grant Katavan Arakamia at the Championship of Europe in Riga in 2010, a game in which Betul Yildiz ended up losing. But let's look at a few exciting moves from that game before moving on. Knight c takes e5, dx e5, 17 knight takes e5, king h7, bishop takes f7, queen to d6, bishop c3, rook e to d8, bishop goes back to c4, making way for knight f7, knight c6, 21 knight f7, queen e7, saving the queen, d4, pawn to g6, knight takes d8, rook takes d8, and white certainly had a lot to be happy with in that 2010 game. As always, I have included the entire game in my notes to this lesson, which you can see at dailychessmusings.com. For now, let's return to Magnus's move 15, knight c6, to which white responds with 16, rook c1. Jan places a rook on the semi-open file. 16 a5. And now Carlsen adds another defender to the a5 square while setting up another possible outpost for his c6 knight. Jan plays 17 bishop c3, and this is a nice dual-purpose move. Jan can now form a battery to attack a5 twice, or push the d3 pawn to d4. Magnus responds with 17 bishop to c8, defending against the threat of queen d2 on a5. But how? Let me show you. Now, if Jan were to continue with 18 queen to d2, Magnus would play bishop e6, and then 19, bishop takes a5, of course, can be met with queen to b8. White can play queen c3, defending the bishop on b3. But then black could play queen a7, adding a third attacker on the bishop on a5. So white can move the bishop to b4, but then knight takes b4, queen takes b4, pawn to d5, discovered threat on the queen. So queen c3, dx c4, bishop takes c4, bishop c5, forming a battery on f2, threatening check and fork. So rook e2, defending the belly button, but then bishop d4, threatening white's queen. So queen b4, but then pawn to c5, threatening the queen once again. Back to b3, bishop takes c4, and rook takes c4 is easily winning for black, and is the diabolical trap that Carlsen set with 17 bishop c8. So Jan took a long time thinking about this next move and played 18 d4. With queen d2 off the table, Jan plays the d4 pawn break, which will open up some tactical lines. Magnus plays 18 ex d4, then 19 knight takes d4, 19 knight takes d4, and 20 queen takes d4. Remember how Carlsen played 12 bishop f8? Well, now we can clearly see why. His bishop is defending against the mate threats on g7, while his rook and knight are tag teaming on the e4 pawn. 20 bishop e6. Carlsen goes on with his bishop e6 idea, which is still nice, and it pins the c4 knight to the bishop on b3. Jan plays 21 h3. h3 controls the g4 square and creates a luft, plus it's definitely preferable to knight takes a5. Had Jan played 21 knight takes a5, Carlsen would have had this neat little tactic of pawn c5. Queen must return to d2 to keep two defenders on the a5 knight. But then bishop takes b3, and now if white's knight takes back, it's leaving a4 for black's rook. And if 23 e5, well then bishop can take a4 as well. Ex f6, g6, rook takes e8, queen takes e8 is certainly exciting, but favors black, which is why Carlsen-Nepomniachtchi played 21 h3. And black plays 21 c6. Carlsen is preparing his own pawn break on d5. 22 bishop c2 allows d5 to be met with e5, since after d5 takes c4 and e5 takes f6, there's no further threat for black's pawn on b3. Carlsen goes ahead with the pawn break as expected, and Jan plays 23 e5. 23 e takes d5 was also playable by white. Black's knight can improve and recapture because of Carlsen's earlier bishop f8 move, stopping the threat of checkmate. So white would probably play queen to e4, threatening checkmate, which is stopped by f5. And then when the queen falls back to d3, knight takes c3, bx c3, black can activate their queen to g5, to which white can respond with knight b6, threatening their rook on a8, rook a to d8, threatening the queen. White's queen can go to f3. Black can play bishop f7, allowing the rooks to engage each other, plus the possibility of the bishop h5 tactics. So queen takes f5, queen takes f5, bishop takes f5, rook takes e1, rook takes e1, would have resulted in an endgame with very even chances. So again, 23 ex d5 was totally playable. But Jan's 23 e5 is also excellent. Carlsen plays 23 dx c4, and again, this is why it was so important for Jan to have played bishop c2. Another interesting variation of note would have occurred had Carlsen played 23 c5, threatening the queen. Jan could move his queen back to d3, forming that dangerous battery, even more dangerous because the guard against checkmate is under threat, but Carlsen could play dx c4, threatening Jan's queen in two directions before it can cause trouble. So queen takes d8, rook e takes d8, ex f6, gx f6, bishop e4, rook to a6, and 28 bishop takes f6 ends up favoring white. Which is why Magnus Carlsen ended up playing 23 dx c4. 24 queen takes d8, so the queens are exchanged. Rook e takes d8, 25 ex f6, and black's 25th move is bishop b4. Carlsen would enjoy fixing his pawn structure while creating dangerous pawn pushes on the queen side if Nepo had traded bishops. 26 fx g7, but of course Nepo plays fx g7, making all of black's pawns isolated. Black plays 26, bishop takes c3, so Carlsen returns the favor on the queen side. 27 bx c3, black plays 27, king takes g7, immediately activating his king. 28, king f1, Nepo inches his king closer to the action as well, which is very important considering Carlsen is threatening rook d2, to which now Nepo can respond rook e2. 28, rook a to b8. With no passed pawns, the rooks belong in open files. 29, rook b1, and black's 29th move is king f6. Carlsen's king placement is much better than Jan's, but Nepomniachtchi has a much better pawn structure. While both sides have isolated pawns on the queen side, Jan's two isolated pawns can stop Carlsen's three with no trouble, while on the king side, Nepomniachtchi's three connected pawns are facing off against Carlsen's two isolated ones. Move 30 for white. Rook takes b8. This pulls Carlsen's other rook out of the d-file. And then 31, rook b1, and the second pair of rooks are exchanged as any other move would have favored white. 32, bishop takes b1. And black's 32nd move is king e5. Carlsen's fantastic king placement makes up for his Swiss cheese pawns. 33, king e2, and 33, f5. 34, bishop c2, and Carlsen plays 34, f4. And now white will not be able to force black's king from its powerful post. 35 bishop b1, obviously looking very drawish at this point. 35 c5, 36 bishop c2, 36 bishop d7. Carlsen is making white's bishop play pawn defender. 37 f3, Magnus plays king f6, 38 h4, king e5, 39 king f2, king f6, 40 king e2, king e5, 41 king f2. And a stunningly accurate game 3 ends in a draw.
I hope you enjoyed today's special presentation of Round 3 from the 2021 FIDE World Championship Match between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi. For more on the match, please visit the official website at FIDEWorldChampionship.com. Additionally, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my Daily Chess Musings YouTube channel. Finally, be sure to check out dailychessmusings.com to find my notes to this video, as well as thousands of other free learning resources. My name is Chris Torres, and I will see you Tuesday after their day off with a special presentation of Round 4 from the Carlsen-Nepomniachtchi match in Dubai.